Welcome to the debate. I want you to just close your eyes for a second and transport yourself to Rabat. We are deep, deep in extra time of the AFCON-final. The air is heavy, it's humid, and the noise is just absolutely deafening. Then a whistle, a VAR review, a penalty decision. And in a split second, the whole narrative shifts from a sporting contest to this chaotic vacuum. The Senegalese team leaves the pitch. For 15 minutes, the grass is empty. The referee is just standing there, checking his watch, while the roar of the crowd sort of curdles into this confused, anxious murmur.
It was a surreal image, wasn't it? It effectively paused the heartbeat of the entire tournament. And I think you could argue that what happened in that 15-minute gap is far more consequential than the penalty kick that followed. Because, eventually, the players came back, the match resumed, and we got what looked like a sporting conclusion. But that gap, that unauthorized absence, it's opened up this massive chasm in the rulebook.
Exactly. And that brings us to the central question we are wrestling with today. Can a trophy effectively be challenged legally after the final whistle has blown? We're dissecting a tension that, it goes to the very heart of sports governance. On one side, you have the sporting conclusion, this idea that once the match is over, the result is sacred. On the other, you have the regulatory breach, the idea that rules are binding contracts, not just, suggestions.
It's the classic conflict between the spirit of the game and the letter of the law. And frankly, it's a complete mess. You have a team that walked off, a referee who chose not to abandon the match, and a losing side, Morocco, now scrutinizing every single legal option they have.
And that is where I'll stake my claim today. I'm arguing for what I'm calling the strict regulatory approach. If we care about the integrity of the sport, we have to look at the text of the law, not the emotion of the moment. That walk-off constitutes a forfeiture. By the letter of the CAF regulations, that behavior demands a change in the result.
And I see why you take that hard line. I really do. But I come at it from a different angle. I'm arguing for a pragmatic disciplinary approach. You just can't ignore the timeline. The match did resume, the ball was kicked. To overturn a result after a sporting conclusion is, well, it's the nuclear option. And frankly, the legal framework of football is designed specifically to prevent that. The remedy here is sanctions, heavy ones for sure, but not a retroactive 3-0 victory awarded in some boardroom.
Well, I think we're going to have a fascinating disagreement on what integrity actually means in this context. Let's get into it.
Let's do it.
Okay, so if I can start with my position statement, it really all boils down to the necessity of precision. Legal arguments in sports governance, they don't live or die on vibes or emotion. They live or die on what is written down on the page. And I'm looking specifically at the CAF competition regulations. There's a clause here that is, in my view, absolutely unambiguous. It states that a team that refuses to play or leaves the ground before the regular end of the match without the authorization of the referee is considered a loser and is eliminated.
That is the text, yes. But context is rarely irrelevant in law. But look at the consequence that's explicitly defined there. It doesn't say, they shall be fined at the discretion of the committee. It says the consequence is a 3-0 loss unless the opponent's score was higher at the time. My position is that the act of leaving the field without authorization triggers this clause immediately. It's like a binary switch. Did they leave? Yes. Did the referee authorize it? No. The fact that they came back 15 minutes later doesn't erase the breach. To use a crude analogy, if I rob a bank but I return the money 15 minutes later because the police showed up, I still committed the robbery. If we allow teams to hold a match hostage and then return when it suits them, we've destroyed the regulatory framework of the tournament. I understand the strict constructionist view, I do, but I simply don't buy that it's that binary in practice. You're focusing on a snippet of text while I think ignoring the reality of the ecosystem. My position, the pragmatic disciplinary stance, is that the timeline is the single most important piece of evidence. The match did resume, we had a final whistle, we had a trophy presentation.
But does a ceremony validate a breach of the rules?
It validates that the match reached a conclusion, which is the primary goal of any sports governing body. The CAF disciplinary code offers flexibility for exactly this reason. While it mentions forfeiture in principle for abandoning a match, it explicitly allows judicial bodies to impose fines, suspensions, or, conditional sanctions instead. My argument is that the legal system in football is designed to protect the result achieved on the pitch, whenever possible. Overturning a final result is the nuclear option. It's the least probable outcome because it just opens up Pandora's box. The system prefers to punish the behavior separately, fine the federation, suspend the players, while letting the scoreboard stand.
I'm just not convinced by that, because it essentially says if you break the rules but come back before the referee loses patience, you get away with it. It creates a loophole the size of a stadium. But okay, let's dig into this first core point, the definition of abandonment versus a temporary protest.
This is the crux of it. You are treating the walk-off as an abandonment. I am treating it as an interruption. And those are two very, very different legal states.
But look at the act and authorization tests in the regulation. The regulation asks two questions. First, did the team leave the ground? The answer is indisputably yes. Second, was it authorized by the referee? The answer is indisputably no. The referee was standing there, waiting. He didn't signal for a cooling break. He didn't signal for a security pause.
But did the referee blow the whistle to abandon the match? I mean, that is the third silent question that I think you're ignoring.
He did it, but that puts the burden on the official to enforce a rule that the team is actively breaking. My point is, allowing a team to pause a global final for 15 minutes without applying the refusal to play regulation, it sets a dangerous precedent. You're telling every team in the future, if you don't like a call, walk off, cause a scene, break the momentum, wait for the officials to beg you to come back. As long as you play the last minute, you're safe from forfeiture.
That's a compelling argument regarding precedent. I'll grant you that. No one wants to see theatrics become a tactic. However, we have to look at how these bodies actually operate. There is a massive difference in the eyes of the law between a team that gets on the bus and leaves the stadium and a team that stands on the sideline or in the tunnel in protest. And that CAF statement released post-match is very telling. They said they are reviewing footage and referring the matter to competent bodies. That is language typically used for disciplinary action. Fines, behavior corrections. It is very rarely the language used when they are considering stripping a title.
But why? Why is that the default? If the rule book says leaves the ground equals 3-0 loss, why are we so afraid to apply it? Why have rules if we're too scared to use them during a final?
Because abandonment usually requires the referee to make a definitive determination that play cannot continue. In this case, the referee, perhaps under immense political pressure, perhaps out of wisdom, who knows, he decided to wait. He allowed the interruption to resolve itself. Once that ball is back in play, the abandonment argument becomes incredibly difficult to make in a courtroom. You're asking a judge to declare a match abandoned that millions of people saw finish on television. You're asking for a legal fiction that contradicts visual reality.
I'd frame it differently. I'm asking the judge to declare that the conditions for forfeiture were met the moment they walked off. The resumption was a procedural error by the referee, perhaps, or a pragmatic choice to prevent a riot, but it shouldn't cure the legal breach committed by the team. I mean, if a player is ineligible and he plays the full 90 minutes, the team still forfeits later. The fact that the game finished doesn't validate the ineligible player. Why does the fact that the game finished validate the unauthorized walk-off?
That's a fair legal theory, specifically that ineligible player analogy. That is strict liability. But this situation runs headfirst into the matters of fact obstacle. This is our second point of contention, and it's probably the biggest hurdle for Morocco. We have to address the elephant in the room, the penalty decision itself.
I agree, but probably not for the reason you think. I actually think the penalty is irrelevant to the legal strategy.
Well, let me lay out the trap first so we're clear on why it's irrelevant. If Morocco's appeal is based, even 1%, on the idea that the penalty was unfair or that VAR got it wrong, the case is dead on arrival.
Absolutely.
We should probably define matters of fact for the listeners. In sports law, this doctrine basically states that decisions taken by the referee about the play, was it a foul, was it offside, was it a goal, are final. They are not subject to appeal. You cannot drag a referee into court to argue about his judgment. If the grievance is, we lost because of a bad call, no court in the world, from CAF to CAS, will hear it.
And I agree completely. This is where the strategy has to be surgical. The legal file must not be about whether the penalty was fair. It doesn't matter if the penalty was a worst call in the history of football. It doesn't matter if the VAR monitor was broken.
So how do you frame it? Because the walk-off was caused by the penalty.
You frame it entirely around the procedural inconsistency of the walk-off. The argument is, we are not protesting the penalty, we are protesting the fact that our opponent was allowed to leave the field of play for 15 minutes without the mandated consequence. Asserting that the walk-off was a reaction to the penalty is irrelevant context. The legal breach is the walk-off itself. You have to sever the cause from the action.
But you can't separate them in the eyes of the public or even really in the eyes of the judges who are human beings. The walk-off was a protest against the penalty. If you punish the walk-off with a forfeiture, you are effectively rewarding the team that benefited from the penalty decision, which, let's be honest, was highly controversial. It feels like rewarding the team that got the lucky break.
But that's the law. We can't just decide to ignore the leaving the ground rule just because the team was angry about a penalty. That's emotional adjudication. If we start saying, well, the referee made a bad call, so you're allowed to walk off for 15 minutes, we just have anarchy.
It's not emotional, it's holistic. The legal bodies will look at the causation. They'll see a referee losing control. But let's move to the remedies, because this is where the rubber meets the road. We're talking about what actually happens next. You are pushing for what we'd call Tier B, the results consequence. You want the 3-0 loss.
I do, and here is why. If Morocco wants to be respected globally, they must pursue the maximalist remedy legally. They have to force a decision on this specific point. Even if it is unlikely, you have to make the argument to establish that walk-offs carry real risk. If you only ask for a fine, you are telling the world that the price of disrupting a final is just a check written by the Federation. It becomes a business expense.
I see that, but I advocate for Tier A, sanctions and integrity. We have to look at what's achievable. A replay is legally impossible because the match was completed. A forfeit is highly unlikely for the reasons we've discussed regarding matters of fact and the referee's discretion. If Morocco stakes their national credibility on overturning the result, they are setting themselves up for a massive, very public loss.
So what's the win for you then? If they don't get the trophy, what is the point of the legal battle?
The best achievable outcome is ensuring heavy sanctions against the opposing federation and players, suspensions for the ringleaders, a massive fine, and crucially, forcing CAF to issue a written reasoned decision that clarifies this for the future. That is a victory for the rule of law without the humiliation of a failed attempt to steal the trophy back in court.
Steal the trophy back. See, that's the framing I reject. Asking for the rules to be applied isn't stealing, it's enforcement.
In the eyes of the football world, winning a title in a courtroom after losing 120 minutes of football is always going to look like theft, regardless of the clause you cite. The field of play doctrine is powerful because it appeals to our basic sense of fairness. The team that scores more goals should win.
But the team that scores more goals while following the rules should win. If I score more goals but I use 12 players, I lose. If I score more goals, but I walk off for 15 minutes to ice the kicker, I should lose.
Perhaps. But let's talk about the process, because none of this just happens by magic. We're moving from the what to the how. The procedure here is a minefield.
It is. We're talking about the exhaustion of remedies.
Right, this is a concept that frustrates fans, but is essential for lawyers. Morocco can't go straight to CAS, the Court of Arbitration for Sport in Switzerland. They have to go through CAF's internal bodies first. They have to appeal to the disciplinary board, then the appeal board. Correct.
And time is the enemy here. If and when CAF renders a decision, which will likely be the disciplinary route you predict, Morocco has a strict window, typically 21 days, to appeal that decision to CAS.
And you can't build a comprehensive legal file in 21 days if you haven't started now.
Exactly. The file must be built now. I'm talking about the official match reports. The referee's report is the holy grail here. What did he write during those 15 minutes? Did he record it as a refusal to play? Did he record it as a security pause? Did he record it as a cooling break?
That report determines the reality of the case. And let's not forget the time-stamped evidence. You need broadcast footage that proves exactly how long they were gone. Was it 5 minutes or 15? That duration matters for the severity of the sanction. And witness statements. Team delegates who were within earshot of the technical area. Did the referee explicitly order them back? Did they refuse an order? That is the difference between confusion and insubordination.
It's a massive procedural hurdle, and you need to prove that the referee didn't implicitly authorize it by waiting. If the referee stood there and said, "Take your time, the case is over."
Exactly. And frankly, this is why I always advise caution. The process is expensive, it's long, and it rarely yields the result fans want.
But if you don't go through the process, you accept the status quo. I want to circle back to something you said about the nuclear option. You think overturning the result is too extreme. But isn't a 15-minute walk-off extreme?
It is. It's unacceptable behavior. It brings the game into disrepute.
So why does an extreme breach deserve a moderate remedy? If the crime is nuclear, shutting down a global broadcast for 15 minutes, why shouldn't the punishment be nuclear?
Because the sport values the field of play above almost everything else. The jurisprudence of CAS and FIFA historically leans heavily towards protecting the physical result. Unless there is proof of match fixing or a player was ineligible, things that fundamentally corrupt the competitive balance, they hate changing scores. A temper tantrum that delays the game, while bad, usually doesn't rise to the level of annulling a result in their eyes, because both teams still had the chance to win on the pitch.
A temper tantrum. You're minimizing it again. It was a strategic withdrawal designed to pressure the officials. It was a tactic.
Or it was a chaotic reaction in the heat of a final. We weren't in the huddle.
And that ambiguity is exactly why we need a hard ruling. If it was chaos, fine. But if it was strategic, if it was a tactic to freeze the kicker, then the strategy must be punished with a loss, or it becomes a valid tactic for everyone else. Imagine the World Cup final in 2026. A team goes down 1-0. They walk off for 10 minutes to freeze the other team's momentum. They come back, say sorry, and play on. Is that football?
No, it's not. And that's why the sanctions need to be severe enough to be a deterrent. I'm talking about banning the coach for 2 years, banning the captain, heavy, heavy fines in the millions. You make the cost of that tactic so high that no one dares try it again. But you don't rewrite the history books of who won the match. You punish the actor, you don't void the play.
That's an interesting distinction, though. I would frame it differently. I think the history book is already rewritten by the walk-off. The asterisk is there. The legal challenge just determines how big the font size is. If the result stands without a challenge, the walk-off is legitimized.
Fair enough, but let's look at matters of fact again for a second. You mentioned earlier that the penalty decision can't be touched, but does the walk-off count as a matter of fact decided by the referee?
That is the pivotal legal question. This is the needle Morocco has to thread. If the referee's report says, "I authorize the pause to restore order," then the existence of the pause is a matter of fact and Morocco is blocked. If the report says, "The team refused to play despite my instruction," then it is a regulatory breach and the door is open.
That's why that report is the single most important document in existence right now. It's not about the video, it's about the paperwork. The referee holds the keys.
Precisely. And this is why I say the strict regulatory path is the only one that respects the intellect of the sport. We can't just vibe our way through a final. We have rules. If the rules are inconvenient, change them next year, but don't ignore them today.
And I say the pragmatic disciplinary path is the only one that respects the reality of the sport. We play to the whistle. The whistle blew. The game ended. To try and unwind that reality creates more problems than it solves.
We're nearing the end of our time, so we should wrap this up. I want to summarize my position in light of this discussion. While the trophy might not move physically from one cabinet to another, the fight here is for precedent. If the rules say leaving the ground equals a loss, that rule must be tested. We acknowledge the penalty itself can't be challenged. We're not litigating the VAR. But I maintain that the procedural integrity of the final was broken by the walk-off. If Morocco does not pursue the maximum remedy, they are complicit in weakening the laws of the game.
And I'll maintain that the sporting conclusion usually trumps legal technicalities, and for good reason. I acknowledge the walk-off was unacceptable, even disgraceful behavior. But I conclude that fines, suspensions, and reputation damage are the likely and the correct outcome. Retroactively awarding a 3-0 victory creates a legal fiction that satisfies lawyers but alienates fans and devalues the actual competition. The best achievable outcome is accountability, not some magical reversal of fortune.
Ultimately, we do agree on one thing. Morocco's strategy must be procedure over noise. Screaming on social media achieves nothing.
Absolutely. Use the rule book, not emotion. Build the file, exhaust the remedies, and accept the ruling.
So we leave you with this thought. Is it better to win the legal argument and lose the trophy? Or is the integrity of the game worth more than the result?
Or perhaps, is the integrity of the game actually saved by accepting the result, flaws and all?
That is the debate. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.